Well, good morning and welcome back to Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I'm Scott Fisher and I'm glad you've chosen to study with me this morning. We're in the midst of a study on the subject of the blood of Abel, the shedding of innocent blood by Israel, and martyr vindication. And today we're going to continue to unpack the prophetic and eschatological nature of the vindication of the blood of the martyrs, specifically looking at what Paul had to say in the book of Acts and the book of Romans, and quoting from the book of Habakkuk. Now, yesterday in Romans chapter 1, we saw that Paul quoted directly from the book of Habakkuk, stating that the righteous man shall live by faith. It's a quote from Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. And I stated yesterday that what's amazing about Paul quoting from Habakkuk is that he does it multiple times. Habakkuk is a vision of the destruction of Jerusalem at some point in the prophet's future. Chapter 1 of Habakkuk describes the coming destruction. Now, Paul's mission was to take the gospel to the Gentiles. We looked at that extensively yesterday. Every city he went into, he first went to the local synagogue and addressed the Jews who were gathered there. He then went to the Gentiles out into the community. Now, Acts chapter 13 records what happened in the city of Pisidian Antioch. Now, this is not the Antioch in Syria. This is up in what is today modern-day Turkey. On the Sabbath day, Paul and Barnabas went to the synagogue in Pisidian Antioch. This is in the area of Galatia. After the reading of the law and the prophets, the synagogue officials asked if Paul and Barnabas had a word of exhortation for the people. And Paul stands up and addresses the congregation of the synagogue, and he begins to recite to them an abbreviated history of Israel leading up to and including the coming of Jesus, the Messiah. And we're going to pick it up in Acts chapter 13, beginning at verse 16. Paul stood up and motioning with his hand said, "Men of Israel, and you who fear God, listen." Now, he's in a Jewish synagogue in Pisidian Antioch, about 800 miles or a little more north of Jerusalem. And notice how he addresses the crowd. Men of Israel. He continues, verse 17. The God of this people Israel chose our fathers and made the people great during their stay in the land of Egypt. Now, they were in slavery eventually, but he refers to it as their stay in the land of Egypt. And with an uplifted arm, he led them out from it. For a period of about 40 years, he put up with them in the wilderness. When he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he distributed their land as an inheritance, all of which took about 450 years. After these things, he gave them judges until Samuel the prophet. Then they asked for a king, and God gave them Saul, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years. After he had removed him, he raised up David to be their king, concerning whom he also testified and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all my will. From the descendants of this man, according to promise, God has brought to Israel a Savior, Jesus. Now, Jesus, son of David, the fulfillment of prophetic promise to the fathers. Now, after John had proclaimed before his coming a baptism of repentance to all the people of Israel, and while John was completing his course, he kept saying, what do you suppose that I am? I'm not he, but behold, one is coming after me, the sandals of whose feet I'm not worthy to untie. Brethren, sons of Abraham's family, and those among you who fear God, to us the message of this salvation has been sent. Now again, Paul emphasizes that the message of the gospel is first for the Jews. To us the message of this salvation has been sent. They were the promised generation. We dealt with this a few weeks ago. They were the terminal generation. They were the promised generation who would see Messiah and experience the judgment that would come on Jerusalem. Now look what he says, beginning in verse 27. For those who live in Jerusalem and their rulers, recognizing neither him nor the utterances of the prophets which are read every Sabbath, fulfilled these by condemning him. Now this is an amazing statement. Those who live in Jerusalem and their rulers, recognizing neither him, neither Jesus the Messiah, not recognizing him, nor recognizing the utterances of the prophets which are read every Sabbath in their hearing, fulfilled those very prophets by condemning him. They didn't recognize their own Messiah. They didn't understand their own scriptures that were read to them every Sabbath for over 1,500 years. Verse 28, and though they found no ground for putting him to death, they asked Pilate that he be executed. And when they had carried out all that was written concerning him, they took him down from the cross and laid him in a tomb. But God raised him from the dead. And for many days he appeared to those who came up with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, the very ones who are now his witnesses to the people. And we preach to you the good news of the promise made to the fathers. Now, over and over, throughout Paul's writings and throughout the book of Acts, when Paul is quoted, he is emphasizing that the message that he preaches is the fulfillment of the promise made to the fathers. It's the gospel from the Old Testament. Verse 33, that God has fulfilled this promise to our children in that he raised up Jesus, as it is also written in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. As for the fact that he raised him up from the dead, no longer to return to decay, he has spoken in this way, I will give you the holy and sure blessings of David. And that's a quote from Isaiah 55, verse 3. Therefore, he also says in another psalm, you will not allow your Holy One to undergo decay. That's a quote from Psalm 16, verse 10. For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid among his fathers and underwent decay. But he whom God raised did not undergo decay. Therefore, let it be known to you, brethren, that through him forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through him, he whom God raised from the dead, through him forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. That's the promise made to the fathers. And through him, verse 39, everyone who believes is freed from all things from which you could not be freed through the law of Moses. Now here he establishes that this new thing being brought in by Jesus, proven by his resurrection from the dead, in fulfillment of the promise made to the fathers, everyone who believes is freed from all things, from which you could not be freed through the law of Moses. The inferiority of the old covenant in contrast with the superiority of the new covenant. But then, Paul issues a very dire warning. And it's this warning that's from Habakkuk chapter 1 regarding the soon-to-come destruction of Israel and the temple. We pick it up in verse 40. Therefore, now remember, he's talking to these Jews in Pisidian Antioch. He addressed them as men of Israel. Therefore, take heed so that the thing spoken of in the prophets may not come upon you. And now he quotes from Habakkuk chapter 1. Behold, you scoffers, and marvel and perish. Now this marvel and perish is it's this shock. You scoffers, watch what's about to happen, and it's going to take your breath away. For I am accomplishing a work in your days, a work which you will never believe, though someone should describe it to you. Now, Paul's warning is direct. Take heed, so that the things spoken of in the prophets may not come upon you. It's quoted from Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 5. And in this prophecy of Habakkuk, God raises up a foreign army, the Chaldeans, to come and destroy Jerusalem, which is under Nebuchadnezzar. And in 586 BC, Jerusalem and the temple was destroyed. In the days and the years leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, false prophets arose and told the people God was going to deliver them. Destruction will not come upon us. We are the people of God. God is with us. As Jeremiah put it, the false prophets were preaching peace and safety. How could God use a pagan army to judge his own people? That's the question that Habakkuk asks of God in Habakkuk chapter 1. Now, Paul takes this very same discussion regarding the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC, the destruction of the temple by a pagan army, and he applies it to first century Jerusalem and the temple, and says that the same thing is about to happen. A pagan army will arise and completely destroy the city and the temple. Something is being done in your days that you would not believe if you were even told. If someone should sit down and describe it to you, you won't believe it. Paul is saying to them that the wrath of God is about to be released on Jerusalem and the temple by an army that God is going to raise up, and it's going to be like a dam about to burst from the pressure of the floodwaters. It builds and it builds and it builds, and then boom, in an instant, the false prophets arose and contradicted the warnings of the prophets, the warnings of Jesus, and the warnings of the apostles. And irony of all ironies, the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed on the exact same day in 70 AD by the Romans as it was destroyed on in 586 BC by the Babylonians. Now, we're going to pick up right here tomorrow morning as we continue to look at Paul's understanding of the coming judgment against Jerusalem, the avenging of the shedding of innocent blood, and this transition from the old covenant to the new covenant. Now, let me encourage you, don't give up. Don't react. Don't ignore the scriptures. And I do want to thank you for studying with me this morning. And if what I'm sharing with you goes against what you've always believed, don't be afraid or intimidated. Study the Word. Go back and review the previous episodes. Follow the text of the scriptures. Wrestle with what it has to say. And we'll continue in our study of the truth of the Messianic kingdom and continue to look at the vengeance poured out on Jerusalem for the blood of the righteous. Well, thanks again for joining me for Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. And I do hope you'll continue to join me Tuesday mornings through Friday mornings each week right here. Now, this week, because I didn't post a video on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'll be posting again tomorrow, a Saturday morning edition. So why not click on the subscribe button on the lower right corner of your screen And you'll be notified in YouTube whenever a new video gets posted. And if you're watching on Facebook, consider sharing this on your wall and invite your friends to watch it. Listen, if you'll do that, it helps spread the message to more and more people. Share it on your wall. And if you saw it on Twitter, retweet it and encourage your friends to watch. And if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, why not join me on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. for Tuesday Nights in the Word? Come out and join us. Hey, I hope you'll go out and make today a great day.